Hello YouTube, welcome to Dumpster Linux Part 5. I thought it was time that we sat down, had a bit of a chat, a recap before we move on to anything more advanced. And yes, I'm wearing anti-static gloves because I've had the lid off that machine behind me. And a look at the motherboard reveals that it's from 2006. Yes, that machine is 6 years old, and you saw, a graphical first-person shooter being handled quite reasonably by it. And this is the graphics card that did it. And as you can see by the components on board, there's nothing on here that even requires an extra heatsink, let alone fans. And that is also from 2006. So, I'm not saying that every 6-year-old machine that you dig out of a dumpster somewhere is going to be capable of what this machine does. It's all dependent on the amount of money that the office managers spent on the computers that they bought for their staff. And this is, all things said and done, a pretty reasonable machine, quite respectful for office work. But what I am saying is that if you were thinking of installing Windows 7 on a machine like that, you'd probably have second thoughts. You'd wonder if it was capable of doing it. But yet that's pretty much what we've done with Ubuntu. We've taken the latest long-term support release pack, put that on there. We've updated it all. We've got a reasonable office suite on there. We've even got a 3D person shooter game on there, for crying out loud. And it's all working reasonably well. The boot time, even accounting for putting your password in and getting the desktop fully up and running, is 40 seconds. That's not bad for a machine of that age. Not only that, storage capability. I queried the machine as to how much all that stuff had taken up, with all the up-to-date patches and all the rest of it. This is an 8 gig memory stick. I could get all that on here with room to spare. It's taken up a measly 6.2 gig of space. There's plenty of room left on that hard drive. So you can get a lot more bang for your buck if you change the operating system to one that's lighter on its feet. There's a serious word of caution that I'd like to say though, and that's about hard disks. In case you've never seen inside a hard disk, this is one. It relies on the fact that this platter actually rotates. It rotates quite fast. Some of them rotate at about 5,000 revs per minute all the time they're switched on. Others rotate at faster than 7,000 revs per minute. And as you can see, just like a vinyl record player, you have a head on there, on the end of an arm that goes across the surface. And there's actually, I don't know if you can see it, but there's actually multiple platters in there. There's more than one surface to be read to and written from. So that's roughly how they work. Now, because of the moving parts in the hard disk drive, my general rule of thumb is if it lasts 3 months, then it'll last its average lifespan, which in my personal experience has been anything between 3 to 7 years. So it might be a consideration to actually swap out the hard drive if you have any doubts, or at least have some sort of system that you can back up your data. Because, well, let's face it, if a machine is in a dumpster, there could be a genuine reason for it being in there. There could be a faulty part in there, you never know. And when it comes to hard disks, if you're going to rely on the hard disk that comes in the machine, make sure you got a backup. So, you don't have to use a machine that's come from a dumpster. You can use an older machine. I mean, many of us who have many households who actually update their systems, they've got older machines hanging around as a matter of course, and you can use one of those. All you need basically is a machine that you can use with impunity, and it doesn't matter if you get it wrong, because pretty much that's one of the only real barriers that are left for people. The fear that they're going to break something, and once that fear is overcome, pretty much the world's your oyster with these things. So get that machine. Set aside a day. Just set yourself down with that machine. Practice getting into the BIOS. Practice using the keys and the extra keys to get around in the BIOS and change the settings. Only change the settings that you feel comfortable with. and you don't need to be comfortable with very many settings. Typically, finding the ability to load the setup defaults, or even load the optimized defaults, that will pretty much reload the BIOS with the common settings for the machine. The boot order is pretty much the most important thing that you need to find and change. Once you've found that, and anything which could disable the channels, so you need to make sure that all the SATA channels, for example, or on much older machines, IDE channels, make sure that all the channels are enabled, so you've got access to all the hardware switched on that machine. And then make sure that you have a boot order, which means that the CD-ROM or USB stick will boot before the hard drive. Once you've got that sorted out, that's all you need from the BIOS. After that, it's a case of slot in the CD and away you go. The installation is some fairly standard, straightforward questions. So, if you set aside a day to have a go at this, if you don't do it and you don't get over the fear and you're not happy with it after a day, fair enough, at least you've given it a crack. But if you do get through it, then that opens up your hardware. That opens up your ability to take the lid off the top, have a nose around inside, find components and change them. I mean, this is an old IDE hard drive. All you do on this one is you've got a power cable in there and a data cable, and that's it. A jumper setting on the IDE hard drives, which you don't need to do on the modern SATA drives, and that's even simpler still. You just plug in the power, plug in the SATA cable, plug it onto the motherboard, and away you go. Same with the CD-ROMs. And that's pretty much about it at this point. It's finding a machine that it doesn't matter if you make a mistake on, and practicing, getting into the BIOS, changing the settings, making sure that it will boot from the CD, putting a CD in, and installing the operating system, just getting through the basic steps. If you manage to do that, and you shouldn't need a whole day, to be perfectly honest. About half an hour to an hour messing around with the BIOS, getting familiar with it, and then just a couple of hours to just run through the install process a few times. Once you do that, a lot of options open up for you. So, that's the conclusion for part 5, and the homework set for you. Get hold of a computer and give it a mess around. Get familiar with it. Right, see you in part 6, where we'll be changing the desktop structure of the machine. We'll be changing how it looks and feels with just a few simple commands. Catch you in the part 6. Bye.